hours, but earlier this spring he looked out the driver's side window of his car and saw a grill of another car. Unfortunately, that was traveling at about 60 miles an hour. And Dave has not been playing golf yet. Not that I guess you could anyway. So. But that wasn't good, Dave. That made me feel bad. I'll talk about a couple of things, but this spring has just really been intense for me. I have a house in Santa Fe, which my partner Michelle is in the process of finishing and redecorating, and it's just been a nightmare. They talked us into buying new LED lights, which cost $50 a piece, and they're all different colors. I mean, not greatly different colors. It's just one of them will be sort of orange, the next one will be sort of red, and then the next one will be sort of blue, and it drives you crazy. It's been driving her crazy, and she's been driving me crazy. And we just had a lot of problems like that, so there's just a lot of stuff going on. Michelle has a contract for 3 books that are due on July 1st, the first of them. I am at this very, not at this very moment, but I almost brought in the car the new Virgil novel, which I am copy editing now because I have to have it in by the 15th and it's not done yet. So I've got like 6 days while I'm doing this tour to finish writing the Virgil book, so that's going on. And everything, we were just so harassed that I started packing for this tour yesterday morning. I came here yesterday, I got on a plane at 10 o'clock in Santa Fe and came here to come here, and I started packing at 8 because everything was so busy. So I've just been running around like a madman today, and I was sitting over at Care TV in the parking lot when my daughter called me and told me that a pipe had apparently broken in the house, and my house was being flooded. And so I was trying to solve that problem while I was trying to, go on television and do this stuff, and I'm getting pictures on my cell phone of all these boards that were warped because there's nothing there, both in the ceiling and the floor, which we can't figure out. And it looks like that's going to be ugly. Then I come here and everybody's happy. So I just turned around and looked at the philosophy section, and there are 3 books in a row: Cannabis, Serial Killers, and Yoga. I don't know what that means, but they're all by the same publisher and look like they're a series. I don't know what order you're supposed to read them in. This new book I finished last December, and this is the 23rd in the series, and the fact of the matter is that people ask me where I get the ideas for these things, and I get a lot of it from the news. I don't actually use the idea that I get from the news, but I'll see something in the news that'll kind of catch my attention, and then I'll do some kind of riff on that, and that turns into the book. Like these 3 women who were kept captive by those people in Cleveland. I would never have 3 women kept captive by a guy in Cleveland. But you take that basic situation and you start thinking about it, and you start putting it together. If I were going to riff on that, it might be like 10 years later, and one of the women finds out that somebody's just gotten out of jail, and so she kills him. And so then you get that kind of a thing, but you start thinking, what are the consequences of an act like that? And that's where you can get a story. This book, which is about a Minnesota senatorial candidate named Taryn Grant, no relation to Bud Grant, is running for the U.S. Senate. She's very good looking, very intelligent, very hardworking, very rich, so she's got the money to do it, and she's losing. And something has to be done about that. And so what she does is that a guy who is working for her and kind of through her dumps some child pornography on a computer that is owned by the major Republican candidate who's quite conservative. This will complete this about a week before the election, so he's done, he's cooked. unless something happens very quickly. As it turns out, he's a rich guy, as is the liberal Democratic governor of Minnesota in my book. I don't know how I came up with that. But at any rate, the liberal Democratic governor of Minnesota says, we just, I don't like the guy very much, but we've known each other since we were children, and the fact is he doesn't look at child porn. I know what he looks at, and it isn't child porn. And I can't describe what the governor says because this is a family gathering, but that's his argument. And he said, we really can't have this kind of thing. We just can't have it because if you put child porn on somebody's computer and the cops find it, they're done. It doesn't make any difference whether they're innocent or guilty. They will never be able to clear themselves. Even if they're found not guilty, there will always be this thing hanging over their heads. So he gets Davenport to find out what the truth of the matter is, and that's what my story is about. Now, where that story came from is no one particular place, but because I was getting so angry about the politics of the country as we went through the political campaign last year. I didn't like either side, and it's not because I don't agree with either side to some extent. I've always been what people would call kind of a conventional media liberal, which means it's somewhat liberal, but not, I'm not crazy or anything like that. I think that, I'm sort of what people would call kind of moderate, but sort of liberal, leaning on the liberal side of things. I was disgusted with both sides. It just seemed like they were tearing up everything, and so that's where this book kind of came from. I don't think that, I don't really believe, I guess, that any senatorial candidate has arranged for the murder or has arranged a series of murders to cover up something. But we've walked sort of up to the edge of that. There have been some crazy people floating around here. The language has gotten so harsh that you kind of wonder what's going on. We have this guy, one of the great political stories this year was the Elvis impersonator who was framed by, what did the other guy do? One guy was the Elvis impersonator, and he was framed by the child molester who was running for office down in Louisiana. Okay, this is our political candidates, right? We got an Elvis impersonator being framed by a child molester, and the child molester is running for office, and he does it by sending poison to the president. And you say, now what does this mean? And what it means is things are sort of running off the railroad tracks here. And so you kind of boil all that down, and you get this thing. And there's a lot of sort of cynicism in there, and there's a lot of kind of harsh stuff. The next Virgil book, which is coming up, has still got kind of a reflection of this stuff in it, because I really felt bad about it.
All available bookstores to register, please. All available bookstores.
Everybody get that? The next Virgil book is sort of a unique book for a thriller, because nobody gets killed. And nobody, one person dies, but he dies a natural death. And everybody's sort of sad. But in that book, I sort of get into the media. And in fact, there was a fist fight between some members of the media when I don't want to go into the whole story, but there's a fist fight that breaks out at a press conference because of the way the media itself is behaving. And that was another thing about this last election campaign. How can you find out? I was a reporter for 20 years, but how can you find out what's going on in the world when you have two liars put in front of the television set, and they lie at each other with these smirks, and then the media somehow called this balanced coverage. You get a liar from the left, and you get a liar from the right, and they're both telling lies, and they've got these little smirks in their face because they both know it. How is that supposed to work out to be some kind of balance? So I don't mean to be, these books are fun and all that kind of stuff, but this sort of came out in this book a little bit. And I sort of like the main character is a very interesting narcissistic personality disorder woman who may show up in another book sometime because she's kind of an attractive character in a really serious way because she knows what she wants and she will not stop at anything to get it because she really doesn't care what anybody else thinks. And the thing that makes her a little bit frightening is that she then has enough money and intelligence, you know, to carry out what she kind of believes in, and what she kind of believes in is sort of crazy. So I think we might be seeing her back, but sometime in the next couple of books, I would guess, when she is now a U.S. Senator. As I said, I've finished I haven't quite finished the new Virgil book. I've got a solid draft. Nobody gets killed. It is kind of funny. It's got another great woman character in it. His name is Ma Nobles, and she has 5 inter-ethnic children. She's 34, and her oldest one is 19. And her kids are named, if I can think of them, her kids are named Rolf, Matteo, Paul Bear, Sam, and I can't remember what the other one is, but she likes children. She doesn't particularly care for husbands. And she thinks Virgil can solve one of her problems, which needs solving, since March 17th of this year. And so she makes really kind of an interesting character. We get involved with some kind of strange government people in the course of this next book, and Virgil is investigating Ma Nobles because she and her son, who run an architectural salvage business out in the countryside down by Mankato, have put 2,000 board feet of lumber at the bottom of the Minnesota River. And what they're doing is that they're peddling it in New England as antique barn lumber every year. And Virgil found out that there was a complaint filed. A guy found out that he had paid $40,000 for antique barn lumber, and when they did he got suspicious, and they did a ring study on it, and found out it was only a year old. So Virgil's sort of investigating her, and then he gets kind of interested in her. Yeah, it becomes very strange and kind of funny, I hope. Since I'm not done with it yet, I'm not sure really. But Ma Nobles is, I think, could be wind up as a continuing character in the Virgil books. But so that's going on. I've got. I'm writing a science fiction novel with a very strange person out in San Francisco named Catine. He only has one name, C-T-E-I-N. He's famous in the photography world as a photographic printer. He does a very difficult form of color printing, which has now come to an end. Because Kodak, which made the only materials of this kind in the world, stopped making them about 15 years ago, and Catine filled up a freezer with it, and now he's run out. He doesn't do it anymore. But he has a double major in physics and English literature from Caltech. And so we're writing a science fiction book together. It's going to be the strangest, one of the oddest science fiction books ever written. But good, I think. And one of the things that some of the parameters we decided on is that we're going to have the least amount of fiction possible. So it tends to be mostly engineering and real science. We don't allow people to go through wormholes or any of this kind of stuff. Everything it's just pretty much straight science. The model that I was looking at actually was Tom Clancy in The Hunt for Red October, in which you have a lot of technology, but the technology was possible. It's not something that somebody just pulled out of the place where the sun don't shine. You know, it's possible. And so we're going to see what happens. There's a theory that you can only have 3 people at the top of a of any particular genre at any one time in book writing. And you know, like right now, I guess you'd say Patterson is maybe at the top of this. He does like 16 books a year or something like that. And you know, a couple other guys, and those people are going to be making, you know, just an ocean of money. But there's a genre slot that was left behind by Michael Crichton that nobody's ever filled. And Michael Crichton filled that kind of credible science kind of thing, you know, like is it possible to find dinosaur DNA and then replicate it and then bring dinosaurs back? And you know, that question is always kind of floated out there. Now people are talking about the possibility of bringing back a Neanderthal. So that's kind of the slot we're looking at, and we will see what happens. I have no idea. We might send this book in and everybody refuses to buy it, and that would be very disappointing. But on the other hand, I think it's going to be a pretty interesting book. And in this book, by the way, which is set in 2060, Minneapolis is the heart of the American technological world, because Silicon Valley has become so hot that it's essentially like Arizona is now. It's, you know, it's 107 degrees in the summertime, and so the technology has tended to move to the more comfortable places where land is still relatively available, and Minneapolis is it. So this becomes kind of the technological focus of the universe. For some reason, Tide, who has lived in San Francisco all of his life, is considering moving to Minneapolis just because he likes it here, and he comes here 2 or 3 times a year to vacation. So it's sort of an unusual guy. He also looks like a garden gnome. That's the other thing about it. We're going to have an interesting cover photograph. It's also probably the smartest guy I've ever met. Anyway, so that's what I'm doing. And as usual in these things, I would like to answer a lot of questions, because that's the best thing. The guy in the blue shirt.
Curious if Lucas will continue to be your lead in the Prey books, and have you ever considered collaborating with Vince Flynn for a book?
I haven't considered collaborating with Vince. They're actually sort of different genres. One of them is more what you call, what Vince writes is sort of what would be called an adventure novel, which are essentially different than a thriller or a mystery. I mean, my kind of thriller, police thriller or mystery. So there are differences. The other thing is that neither one of us would want to share the money. We wouldn't make any more by collaborating, and we wind up having to cut it in half. So it's like Davenport is going to go on for at least 2 more. I honest to God thought I was going to quit before now, but then somebody pointed out, how can you quit at 23 when you got, 25 is coming up, so I think I'm going to do probably 2 more.
Don't quit.
But Virgil's are a lot easier for me to write for some reason, because Virgil is lighter, and also the plots tend to be somewhat less complicated, and so they're quicker to write. But I'm getting to the age where this is starting to hurt, and I would like to have at least 1 more career before I drop dead. So, the guy in the brown shirt.
John, when you list someone else as helping you out with the book, do they actually help you with the book, or they just sit in the front of the boat or on the next bar stool and say, hey, Virgil should do this in his next book?
It sort of depends. I haven't had any real bar stool sitters yet, but the amount that they do is different. Dave provided like an extremely intricate outline in which I could just write the story from, but he didn't do a lot of the actual writing. Souchere gave me a manuscript which was written, but which I couldn't get, which was not publishable. And so then what I did was I took his manuscript through and I completely remodeled it. Either way, one is just about as hard as the other. But the thing is that when you've written this many books, it's hard to come up with the ideas, the plots, the kind of switches that go on, all that kind of stuff. The writing is actually relatively easy. You can just sit there and if I know what I'm going to write, I can write 2,000 words a day with no problem. But if I don't know what I'm going to write, then I've got to think about that, which is a big problem. And then I've got to actually write it, which is another big problem, because those two things kind of take energy from the same place. So it takes twice as long. If I can get somebody like Dave to lay the book out for me, then I can write it pretty quickly. Then all I have to do is concentrate on the writing. And I've been doing this for so long that the writing, it's not automatic, but it's much easier if I know what the evolution is coming up, what's going to go on in the book and so on. So what they do is not so much write the book as they make it possible for me to write a second book. And I wrote books for a long time when I was much younger, when I could only write one a year, just because the one a year was exhausting. Going to 2 books a year is made possible by the fact that they're doing this. Yeah.
Are you doing another kid now?
But no more kid novels. I'm done with him. Actually, I said goodbye to him essentially in this book. Kid is in this book very deeply. And at the very end of the book, the kid's got the last line of the book. Kid, his wife, have the last line of the book.
Spoilers.
The fact is people don't like Kid as well. Some people like Kid a lot, but other people don't like him as well because he's a criminal. And they don't like that. They don't like that. The guy leaves. Yeah, back there.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. Is Lucas going to go after the female assassin from Silken Prey in your next 2, maybe?
You mean the female assassin from Silken Prey?
The woman that was
Is that Clara Rigger? Clara Rigger's dead. You missed the next book. She dies in a truly unfortunate manner. I think the second book is actually, the second Clara Rigger book is better than the first one.
Yeah.
And other people would disagree, but the second Clara Rigger book, she is really spectacular. She has really let it all hang out in that one. So. Yeah.
Have you thought about a young adult Letty doing anything?
Pardon me?
Lucas is his daughter. Have you thought about doing something with her as becoming an adult?
I can't make that work. The question is it possible to make Letty into a young adult novel? And I can't make that work because the problem is that if you look at young adult novels, which I've done extensively, looked at young adult novels, they have to be estranged from their parents, or the stories don't make much sense. It's very hard to have kids who are not estranged from their parents and write a young adult novel, because most of them are like being on your own 2 feet and fighting off some kind of an oppression, doing things that normally your parents would take care of. You can't. It's hard to write a young adult novel that has a level of stress, of my kind of book at any rate, that has a level of stress that Davenport wouldn't take care of. But he, and so it's hard to make her into a young adult character. I could see making it, if Letty had grown up as she started, living with her family out in the kind of the wilderness and growing up as kind of a cowgirl, and being, really tough, kind of harsh runaway when she was, and that's sort of what Clara Rigger was. She was sort of like Letty as she got older, and then she becomes a killer. And so a number of people have mentioned that. I think she'd be an attractive character, but she might be more attractive to adults than she would be to.
Well, I was actually thinking of her as a young adult, going into whatever she goes into, following her father's footsteps in a way. But that's just, I just.
Yeah, well, that creates more problems. I mean, By the way, does Susan Stackhouse get killed in this book? The new one that's out today. Does anybody know? There's been some kind of thing on the internet about it. I don't know. I thought maybe somebody here would. That guy.
Do you read as prolifically as you write?
I read a lot of history. One of the things that got me good, there's this book, and I can't even tell you who wrote it. It's a history of World War II that I read, and there was a paragraph in it about 25 pages in where the guy is reviewing the politics between World War I and World War II that led directly to World War II. But the thing about that paragraph was that, it was absolutely the same situation we have now. In a way, it implied. I mean, it's almost as if he wrote it deliberately because of the echo that it creates. The guy's name is Corrigan, who wrote it. I think it's called A History of World War II. But I don't take that kind of an extreme position. But the whole kind of thing about you can't trust the financial systems. People are beginning to blame small groups within the population for all of their problems. And and he kind of runs down this great big list of stuff, and then the economy goes to hell, and unemployment starts to rise, and you start to look at what he was talking about just in that one paragraph, and you say, boy, that really is parallel to things now. And of course, what happened then was it lurched over the edge, and a lot of countries solved their problems by hiring extremists. We haven't done that, and God help us. I hope nothing like that would ever happen. But that's the kind of stuff I read a lot of history, and I read my competitors as well, or my colleagues, whichever you want to call them. And it depends on what day they come out. If they come out the same day as I do, then they're competitors. So I read all that stuff too. Yeah, I probably read a book a week, I would think, of one kind or another. Yeah.
You talked about journalists aren't the same as homicide detectives aren't the same as private detectives, but it seems to me that there's some skill sets and personality characteristics that would make one a good one of those. So how would you distinguish between those kind of three or even two?
Journalists, homicide detectives, private detectives?
Yeah, would make a good one of each of those.
Well, cops and journalists tend to come from the same social class. Middle, lower middle, a lot of government employment and stuff like that. But most journalists could never become cops. They just have a different worldview of things. And I like a lot of cops, and I think cops are really interesting people. But I would have a hard time being a cop just because my attitude is wrong, I guess. I don't have that clear a sense of right and wrong. And so you see some guy walking down the street smoking a joint, and I don't care. Well, actually, a lot of cops don't care, but a lot of cops do care, and they really have a sense that there are lines that you shouldn't cross, and that society depends on them to keep an eye. And I approve of that. That's just not what I do, and that's not what most reporters do. And as far as private detectives, I think there aren't very many of them. There's one in my new Virgil book. He actually combines a couple of those categories because he's a private detective who can't make a living in Mankato, so he sells dope to the students. That's his other job. There's a very funny scene when Davenport walks up to the private detectives who's sitting in a booth with his client, and Virgil said, "What did this guy hire you to do?" So the private detective goes, and tells him everything. And the client says, "Wait a minute, isn't this like a client privilege type thing?" And Virgil then explains to somebody that the guy's got 100 pounds of dope down in his basement, and if he doesn't cooperate, they're going to bust him for it. So I've never met a private detective. I think that most of them are involved in car repos, not really sneaking around, doing Robert Parker kind of stuff. Yeah.
How did you develop the Virgil character, and is he going to become more like Lucas?
No, he'll never become more like Lucas because he's always way too laid back for that. I think Virgil might quit eventually. And Davenport, when I get to the 25th book, if that's the end of it, I may just stop. There just won't be any resolution to Davenport's whole life. But I do have an extension of it if I decide to do it, and that's that Davenport is that the Minnesota governor, who's been in a number of books now, and who I like as a character because he's kind of funny, becomes vice president of the United States, and he owes things to people, like some of the characters in my books, and so he gets them jobs. Davenport becomes a U.S. Marshal, but he's sort of semi-retired too because he's got a lot of money, he's got a lot of other things to do, so he only takes weird cases. He only takes cases where nothing is being done, and there's people kind of ignoring something because it's just too idiosyncratic and kind of weird, and he then takes that case and that gets him away from his kids and his wife, and he's on the road and that kind of stuff. But whether that'll ever happen, I don't know. Well, I'll tell you, one of the really annoying things that happened to me in my life is that, I mean, it wasn't annoying at the time, but, and extending that just annoys me. You know what I mean? I mean, it just, I find it really annoying that they're sitting on all those things there, and there's nothing I can do about it. So, I mean, I took the money at the time, it's my fault, but what can I tell you? Anybody else?
Got a guy here.
Okay, the guy that I can't see, there you go.
Have you thought for expanding the role for Sloan or Dill in a future book?
Well, Sloan is now running a bar in one of the books. And he was deliberately sort of a colorless character. He was deliberately colorless. He wore nothing but brown suits for his whole run in the thing, you know, and it was like, that was just his style. His style, you know, he got married when he was 19 or something like that, and he's a very devoted family character, something like that. It'd be hard to make him into the main character of a thriller. Dale could be, but I'm sort of at the point where I'm winding those down anyway. If I write 2 more Davenport books and then stop, I think that I might continue Virgil for a while, but that would probably be the last one. I mean, I'd like to have one more career, and the writing is, it's not so much it's gotten harder, it's gotten kind of boring. The thing is that, the thing about writing is if you actually look at what people do, you sit in an office for 6 or 7 hours a day and type. And I guess, you know, I'd like to go outside more. And so I just don't know if I can continue this, and especially as I get older. Yeah. I got one, but I don't want to talk about it.
Fishing.
It's not going to be. I'm not going to be on the radio like Joe. I'm going to be on the radio with Suchere on Thursday at 2:00, and I think I'm going to jack him up a little bit. You know, it's been we've been sitting around for a long time without doing too much. So, is your head up?
Yep.
Okay.
So, are any of those people that own the rights to Lucas Davenport, is anybody talking about a movie?
Well, they made 2 television movies out of them.
Okay.
And they do pretty well off of those things, and I do all right off of those things. I mean, you know, I get a little taste every time I make one, but it's just annoying that those things are all kind of tied up, and they're tied up by TV people. So I'm not going to get like a major movie. If I'm going to get a major movie,
Okay.
I mean, it's going to have to be a new book that doesn't mention anything to do with, you know, the Lucas Davenport universe or the Virgil Flowers or the kid. So.
Okay, so it's tied up with TV.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
it's tied up with a bunch of TV guys, and that's sort of the end of the line on that. And I don't really care that much about movies anyway. I mean, nobody ever believes this when you tell. Not even my partner believes it. But I'm a commercial writer, and I really do this to make a living. And it's really almost impossible to make a living out of movies unless you are the top guy. I mean, there are 30 people or 50 people or 100 people in Los Angeles who make a unbelievably rich living off of movies and television. But if you're not one of those, you're making a cop's salary, you know, carrying stuff around from semi-trailers and stuff. So and I mean, you know, I can't remember the guy's name. He was a pretty famous screenwriter for a while. He made 4 or 5 big movies and wrote a couple of books about them. But if you make 4 or 5 movies and you get paid $500,000 a piece, and so you've made, you know, $2.5 million, but you spread that over a 20-year career, you know, you're making $100,000 a year or something like that. And so it's not, which is all right, but it's not like, you know, people portray it in the movies when they show you, you know, a producer's house sitting up on top of the hill in Beverly Hills where they've got $1 billion. I found out this year that the LA Country Club, I don't know if this is still true, but for many, many years did not allow actors or directors to be members of the club. The only people that were in there were real estate people and oil people.
Interesting.
And they specifically kept actors, producers, and directors out. So, yeah, the guy in the orange shirt.
Thanks. I know that.
Orange shirt.
Thanks. Kid is your first published novel,
Right.
but I noticed from your website you've got a couple you wrote before that you don't think are good enough to publish. I wonder which character you wrote first. Was it Kid or was it Davenport or was it
Kid
someone else?
first. Davenport was technically published before the Kid was, just by a matter of a couple of weeks. But I wrote the Kid first, and then it was scheduled for to come out a year later. Then I wrote a Davenport in about 3 months. They scheduled that, and it wound up coming out. But Kid was the first one.
But the earlier unpublished ones, are they?
The earlier unpublished ones did not have any of those characters in them, and were not even. One of them was a science fiction book, or a semi-science fiction book. The other one was a thriller novel, but it had a private detective in it, and he was sort of a kid, or sort of a Virgil kind of character, but it was set in Miami, and I was a reporter in Miami for 10 years or so before I came up here, and that would have been an interesting city to work in if that book was sold. So. Yes.
Some of us are starting to read books on tablets, and here you are at Barnes & Noble. Is this an exclusive deal, so then maybe your books would not be available on Amazon or other online book sellers?
They're available. They're available on Nook, and they're available on Kindle, and they're available through Amazon and all that kind of stuff. I don't know what's going to happen with that. It's just things have gotten so kind of weird that you can't tell what's going to happen, because the other thing is that the media seems sort of, in a way, I had really have some bad problems with the media, but in some ways newspapers almost seem to be coming back sometimes, you think. People are beginning to understand that reading a blogger is not giving you the news. He's giving you his opinion based, his ninth-hand opinion on something. And it's not the same as reading the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal. Unfortunately, those people didn't have any way to monetize themselves in the early part of the whole web thing. And now they're starting to develop that. They're starting to, require subscriptions and that kind of thing. So they might be coming back a little bit. Although I saw recently that the New York Times was down again financially a little bit. So I don't know what's going to happen. But who knows? Let me take your question and then let's sign some books. Yeah.
I was just wondering if you follow some of the big changes that happen in the publishing industry right now, or are you more apart from those because of your success?
I have almost nothing to do with the publishing industry except that my books are published. When you're a writer, things are divided up. It's an extremely efficient operation, despite what you hear about the way, how clumsy it is. But it is. It's extremely efficient. I'm published by one of the biggest published companies in the world, and I don't think they own anything. They're just a large bunch of people in a rented building, and they rent everything. They rent copy editors, and they rent printing presses. And so the guy who is the editor of my book, Neil Nyron, who is a really terrific editor, but I don't think he owns his desk. The thing is that it's just this big bunch of people who are working really hard and make quite a bit of money at it. And then someplace there's a printing plant, and all they do is print books for everybody. They don't print it. And then I've got an agent who's sort of like the union or something like that, because she does the negotiation between all these things. But I have no continuing obligation to her, and she has no continuing obligation to me. It's just an ad hoc relationship that continues because it's beneficial to both sides. So we have these fragments of this industry which are scattered all over the country. I'm living in Santa Fe. She lives in New York, as does Neil. But the publishing plant, the last I heard, was someplace in southern Jersey. And all these people we're all connected electronically, but basically we're scattered all over the place. And so there is a publishing industry, but it's not really what a lot of people think. It's not like 3M or something where you've got a big building with stuff kind of cooking out the back, and it's just like a really large group of people cooperating to make money, and also to build reputations in some cases as opposed to making money. So that's what that is. It's just kind of a strange business. if there are no more urgent questions, let's go ahead and sign books. And you heard the guy say what the arrangements for that are, and you probably listen more closely than I did. So, thank you.
Let's see.